Counterpunch. One of the characteristics of your personality, of which you seem very proud, is your ability to counterpunch. You mentioned this during the campaign and continue to do so voraciously. Often it would seem that you are really shadowboxing since there is no one on the other side, or your opponent has long since left the ring. The irony of these punches and counterpunches, most of which seem to come from you on both sides, is that they continue to highlight things which anyone else would have long ago allowed to die in ignominy. Every week, sometimes daily, you mention your opponent from the previous election. Most of your predecessors quickly moved past the election, and their opponents have been lost to history. In fact, most people would be hard-pressed to name even the most recent loser in the quadrennial event. Yours, on the other hand, continues to be in the news and making headlines. Most of those headlines are thanks to your naming her constantly in your Twitter feed. The investigation, which has caught so much of your ire, also is something most people would have allowed to play out in obscurity. You, on the other hand, have to mention it daily, if not several times a day. Investigations routinely take place in various venues around the country all the time. Most are never noted by the news media and certainly do not gather headlines. Obviously, since this is about you, Mr. President, it would gather more scrutiny. But except for your need to mention it constantly, it probably would chart its normal course and with little fanfare until such time as there was an indictment or trial. This one, on the other hand, makes headlines on rumors, suspicions, and innuendos, all of which at other times would have been ignored. But you cannot ignore anything. You have to counterpunch, even if there's nothing worth punching in the first place. This is also the case with the opposition party. As you so often point out, the economy continues to roar, seemingly with no end in sight. The unemployment rate continues at historic lows, while inflation is barely visible by past standards given this kind of economy. If it weren't for you creating problems with your trading partners, everyone would be happy and the stock market, although at historic highs, would be in the stratosphere. Given all this wonderful news, the by-elections should be a no-brainer. Your party should be in the forefront of every poll, and yet it is struggling against the disorganized and radicalized opposition who does not seem to know where they're going. Part, most often, of the reason is you, Mr. President. Your absurd statements about the Democratic Party being helped by the Russians, your clamoring for servers, although all the information off these devices have already been distributed to the officials who need them, your chiming in on every little insignificant opposition politician, bullying and calling them names. All these tactics draw attention and money to a party who is struggling to know if it is and where it is going. This makes me wonder if you really are doing yourself, your party, or the country any service by continuing these antics. Each counterpunch gains national notoriety and yet achieves nothing. Each verbal slash draws attention to things and people which otherwise would be forgotten. Each confrontation leaves you weaker and others stronger. Are you trying to undermine your future and your legacy? Is this the reason for all of this? I doubt it, given your personality traits. But what you are doing is not accomplishing what I think you would like for it to do. I'm sure people in your entourage have told you this. Listen to them and get on with the business of making this country great.